The morning sunlight had barely touched the city when Marcelline Vale stood in the middle of a crowded courthouse hallway, her wedding dress folded over one trembling arm and tears shining on her face like broken glass. People rushed past her with files, briefcases, and coffee cups, but she looked like someone whose whole world had stopped while everyone else kept moving. Her voice was small, but the pain inside it could have split stone when she looked at me and said, "I need a husband by tomorrow." I should have laughed. I should have told her that life did not work like that marriage was not a coat you borrowed because the weather had changed. But there was something in her eyes that morning, something terrified, exhausted, and painfully honest, and before my mind could catch up with my heart, I heard myself reply, "Then pack your bags for my place." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the strange way life can bring two broken people together at exactly the right time, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Ancient Truth for more emotional stories like this. My name is Rowan Elric, and until that morning, I was the kind of man who believed safe choices made safe lives. I owned a small repair shop on Briar Street, the kind with old fans turning lazily in the ceiling, dusty radios on the shelves, and sunlight falling through the front windows every afternoon. I fixed clocks, lamps, radios, and sometimes things people only brought in because they could not bear to throw them away. Maybe that was why Marcelline came to me first. We had known each other for almost 2 years, not closely, not in the way people tell secrets, but enough for me to know she always smiled even when tired, always said thank you twice, and always carried herself like someone holding a house together with bare hands. She lived 3 blocks from my shop with her younger brother, Tavio, a gentle 17-year-old with a heart condition and eyes too serious for his age. Their parents had died years earlier, leaving behind debts, memories, and a crumbling family home with a lemon tree in the yard. That house was all Marcelline had left of them, and it was also the reason she stood shaking in front of me that morning. Her late father's older brother, Aldrin Vale, had found a legal loophole in the inheritance papers. The house would remain in Marcelline's name only if she could prove she had a stable family household before the final property review, which was scheduled for the next morning. It was an old clause, cruel and outdated, buried in papers no grieving daughter had understood at 18. Aldrin wanted the house sold to developers, and he had waited patiently for years, like a wolf waiting for the lamb to grow tired. Marcelline had been engaged to a polished banker named Cashin Rook, a man who wore expensive suits and spoke softly enough to hide the sharpness underneath. He had promised to marry her quietly before the review, promised to protect the house, promised to love Tavio like family. But that very morning, only one day before the hearing, he vanished. No call, no apology, just a message sent through his sister saying he had changed his mind because Marcelline's problems were too heavy for a new marriage. Later, we learned Aldrin had paid him off. But in that hallway, all Marcelline knew was that the man who promised to stand beside her had left her standing alone. I took her home in my old blue truck while the morning city glittered cruelly around us. Shops were opening, children were walking to school, vendors were arranging fruit under yellow umbrellas, and Marcelline sat beside me with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. She did not cry loudly. That would have been easier. Instead, tears slipped down her cheeks in silence, and every now and then she swallowed like she was trying to keep her heart from coming out of her throat. When we reached her house, Tavio was sitting on the porch steps in a faded green sweater, waiting. He saw his sister's face and stood too quickly, one hand pressing against his chest. Marcelline ran to him, and the two held each other beneath the lemon tree as sunlight spilled over them like something holy and helpless. I told them I would help, though I had no idea what that meant. Marriage by tomorrow sounded impossible, foolish, even dangerous. Yet the more I listened, the more I realized Marcelline was not chasing romance. She was fighting for shelter, memory, and the only place where her brother could sleep without fear. She had spent years working double shifts at a bakery and a laundry service, paying hospital bills, fixing leaks, buying medicine, smiling at neighbors who never knew how close she was to losing everything. She was not asking for a fairy tale. She was asking not to be crushed by a system designed to favor the cruel. That afternoon, we went to see a retired family lawyer named Orvina Slate, a sharp-eyed woman who lived above a bookshop and smelled faintly of peppermint tea. She read the papers slowly while Marcelline sat stiffly beside me. The room was bright with daylight, filled with old legal books and dust floating in sunbeams. When Orvina finally looked up, her face had softened. She said the clause was terrible but enforceable, and a legal marriage before the review could strengthen Marcelline's claim, especially if the household included Tavio's welfare. She warned us that Aldrin would question everything. He would call it fraud. He would humiliate us if he could. Then she looked at me over her glasses and asked if I understood what I was offering. I did not fully understand. Not then. I only knew that when I looked at Marcelline, I saw someone who had been abandoned at the edge of disaster, and I remembered my own mother years earlier, begging landlords for one more week after my father died. I remembered how no one helped us because everyone had their reasons. They were busy. They were afraid. They did not want trouble. Safe choices made safe lives, I used to tell myself. But safe choices had never saved anyone who was drowning. By late afternoon, the marriage office was nearly closing. The sun was still high, bright and golden, pouring across the stone steps as Marcelline and I stood in line with forms in our hands. She wore a simple cream dress borrowed from a neighbor, and I wore the only clean shirt I had in my truck. There were no flowers, no music, no smiling relatives. Only Tavio, pale but determined, holding a paper bag with 2 bakery cupcakes inside because he said every wedding needed cake. When the clerk asked if we were certain, Marcelline looked at me with shame in her eyes, as if apologizing for needing help. I wanted to tell her she was not a burden. I wanted to tell her that some people deserve to be chosen without having to earn it through suffering. But the words caught in my chest, so I simply nodded. We were married at 4:17 in the afternoon beneath a buzzing ceiling light, with traffic murmuring outside and sunlight crawling across the floor. It should have felt fake. It should have felt like paperwork. But when Marcelline signed her name beside mine, her hand trembled, and I gently steadied the page without touching her fingers. Something passed between us then, not romance exactly, but trust in its earliest and most fragile form. A quiet agreement that neither of us would let the other fall. That evening, she packed 2 suitcases and came to my small apartment above the repair shop with Tavio. The place smelled of wood polish, soldering metal, and old coffee. It had 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a sitting room crowded with broken clocks waiting for repair. I gave them the bedroom and slept on a folded blanket near the window. Marcelline tried to protest, but exhaustion defeated her. I heard her crying softly after midnight, though she tried to hide it beneath running water in the bathroom sink. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the city settle into darkness, wondering how one sentence in a courthouse hallway had changed all our lives. The next morning came bright and merciless. Daylight filled the hearing room where Aldrin Vale sat in a dark suit, smiling like a man already counting money. He looked at Marcelline as if she were a stain he intended to scrub away. Beside him sat Cashin Rook, the runaway fiancé, unable to meet her eyes. Marcelline went still when she saw him, and for one terrible moment I thought she might break. But then Tavio reached for her hand, and she straightened. Aldrin's lawyer attacked us immediately. He called the marriage sudden, suspicious, and unnatural. He said I was a stranger, said Marcelline was desperate, said Tavio's illness made her unstable, said the house would be better handled by responsible family members. Every word was dressed politely, but every word was a knife. Marcelline sat beside me, silent tears gathering but not falling. When they asked me why I had married her, the room seemed to shrink around my answer. I told them about the morning I found her abandoned at the courthouse. I told them about Tavio waiting under the lemon tree. I told them I had known Marcelline for 2 years, that I had watched her work until her hands cracked, watched her care for her brother, watched her repair a life other people kept trying to damage. I said a home was not made stable by wealth or appearances, but by the people willing to protect each other inside it. My voice shook at first, but grew stronger, because every word was true. Then Orvina presented proof that Aldrin had contacted Cashin days before the wedding and transferred money into an account connected to him. Cashin folded under questioning. His face turned gray, and his careful mask collapsed. He admitted Aldrin had paid him to leave Marcelline before the review. The room went silent. Marcelline closed her eyes, not in surprise, but in grief. Betrayal hurts differently when it confirms what your heart was already afraid to know. The review board postponed Aldrin's claim and granted Marcelline temporary protection of the home pending investigation. It was not a complete victory, not yet, but it was enough to breathe. Outside the building, under the clear midday sky, Marcelline stood on the steps as if she had forgotten how to move. Then she turned to me and whispered that I had saved her family. I wanted to say she had saved herself long before I arrived. Instead, I told her we would take it one day at a time. And we did. What began as an emergency became a strange, gentle routine. Marcelline worked mornings at the bakery and afternoons helping me organize the repair shop. Tavio studied at the counter, surrounded by clocks and wires, slowly regaining color in his cheeks. Customers began to know Marcelline by name. She had a way of making the shop feel warmer, placing fresh flowers in chipped jars, cleaning the front windows until sunlight poured in like honey, leaving small notes on repaired items that said things like, "Your grandmother's lamp is shining again." At first, Marcelline and I moved carefully around each other, polite as strangers sharing a fragile secret. But kindness has a way of becoming familiar. She learned I took my tea too strong. I learned she hummed when nervous. She learned I kept my father's broken pocket watch in a drawer because I had never been brave enough to fix it. I learned she blamed herself for every misfortune that touched her family. Some evenings, when the shop closed and the sun lowered behind the buildings, we sat by the open window while Tavio read on the floor. We spoke about small things at first, then deeper things. Loss. Fear. The strange guilt of surviving. The exhausting courage it takes to wake up and keep going. Weeks passed. Aldrin's scheme unraveled. Cashin left town in disgrace. The court confirmed Marcelline's right to the house, and the lemon tree remained hers. By then, our practical marriage had done what neither of us expected. It had become a shelter. Not perfect, not sudden, not like the stories where people fall in love because music tells them to. It grew quietly, in shared breakfasts, in hospital visits, in repaired roof tiles, in the way Marcelline began laughing again when Tavio made terrible jokes, in the way my empty apartment no longer felt empty when her shoes were by the door. One afternoon, nearly 3 months after the courthouse morning, Marcelline found me sitting alone in the repair shop, holding my father's pocket watch. Sunlight lay across the workbench, warm and gold. I told her I had never fixed it because part of me was afraid that if it ticked again, I would have to admit he was truly gone. She sat beside me and did not rush to comfort me. She simply stayed. Then she took my hand, gently, fully, without trembling. That was the moment I understood love was not always lightning. Sometimes it was daylight. Sometimes it was someone sitting beside your pain and not looking away. A year later, we stood beneath the lemon tree in Marcelline's yard and renewed our vows, not because a legal clause demanded it, not because fear had trapped us, but because love had found us in the wreckage. Tavio walked his sister down the garden path with tears in his eyes and strength in his steps. Orvina cried into a handkerchief and denied it. The neighbors brought food, children chased each other through the grass, and the afternoon sun covered everything in gold. This time, Marcelline wore flowers in her hair, and when she looked at me, there was no panic, no shame, no desperation. Only peace. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who still believes good people exist, comment your feelings below, and subscribe to Ancient Truth so more stories of hope can reach those who need them. And please comment, kindness still matters, just before you leave, so we know this story reached your heart. Marcelline once told me she needed a husband by tomorrow, but what she truly needed was someone to stand beside her when the world tried to take everything. I thought I was giving her a name on paper, a temporary answer, a shield for one impossible day. But in saving her home, she gave me one too. Not the house with the lemon tree, not the apartment above the shop, but the kind of home that lives in a person's voice when they call your name, in their hand when it finds yours, in the quiet promise that no matter how cruel yesterday was, tomorrow does not have to be faced alone.